Hey there, Jay here, and we are in the home stretch to register for my year-long teacher training starting in January. Registration is closing at the end of this month, and there are only so many spots still available. I've received a few notes from people who are interested and have concerns about time commitments and being in different time zones and whether or not their busy lives would allow for them to participate. And that is why I specifically designed the program to be co-creative, meaning that it's not an arbitrary curriculum that is imposed upon you from the outside that you have to follow, but rather it has space enough for you to shape it in the way that makes sense for you. And I've attempted to demonstrate how this works some by recording this series of mini talks with people who are participating. Today, I talk with Zubia. Hi, Zubia.
Hi, Jay. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm glad to have this moment with you. Thanks for signing up to do it. I so appreciate it.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm glad to do this.
Well, I really appreciated also what you wrote in your little email to me was exactly the reason why I'd be interested to have a little chat with you about the training, because there are a wide range of different sort of people in different life situations who've participated in it at this point. And there are a fair number of people like yourself who either live in different time zones or just have lives that are such that they aren't necessarily able to come to like a lot of live meetings. So a lot of it's been more on replay for them. And it still seems like people are getting things that they want or need from the training. And it seems like that might be true for you. So that's why I was curious to speak to you and hear from you how it's gone. And if you have been getting stuff from the training, even though, again, you haven't been able to come to as many live meetings as you might have liked.
Yeah, I mean, even though I'm like in Norway, so completely different time zone, and I haven't been able to join most live calls, and even the ones that fit my time schedule, my time zone, sometimes I still wasn't able to join because, as you said, life, I have a full-time job and everything, so takes up time, and a lot happens in a year, right? Like,
yes.
Because the training is over the course of a year, so I've even lived in different countries while during that time. So
you moved. I didn't know. Did you even tell me that? I didn't know that you made a move while this year happened. Huh.
No, it was for field work, so it was just like for a short of time, but it was really fun also to do that. So yeah, I felt like it's been really kind of really easy to follow like the scheduling, and I really love that you had this like 1 week of catch up.
Yeah,
kind of. I really appreciated that because it's always, and I have a little reminder on my calendar, watch replay and things like that, but things still get in the way. But yeah, like even though I have not been participating live so much, I still feel like I know the people that are participating as well as you can know them. Like I still feel like I have been part of it throughout the whole time. So whenever I'm live, I feel like I know the people quite well because I've been watching the recordings, but they might not know me as much. But at least for me, the feeling is really, really like as if I had been there. And I really appreciated that the times that I had some questions, I could always send you, like a quick email and say, hey, could you talk on this? Could you say something about this? So I really felt like obviously I would have loved to join all of the sessions, but again, I don't think that is possible with having a full-time job and everything, but it's been really good. I felt really involved all throughout, even not being able to join all the live ones. So I really appreciated that. That feeling also of being welcomed whenever, just come in whenever you can. So I feel just like one of the group, Well,
I'm glad to hear that. Certainly whenever you were around, it didn't you seem to meld right in. There's not like a problem where you're not part of the group. And I have a similar feeling like with the podcast, where people listen to the podcast for years and they kind of come to know me, even though I've never met them. So when I do meet them, it's very easy for us to be friends right away.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm curious about the yoga side of it, more than just it being able to fit into your life. What kinds of things have you been able to take from it? What are the things that have been most helpful to you in terms of like your interest in yoga?
So I really appreciate your approach that you take to yoga in general and to the learning. So I did a teacher training a couple of years ago, also online, actually, when it was not really a thing. Now it's a thing because of COVID, and we've moved to this new model and everything, right? But before it wasn't a thing, and I actually felt really weird about it. Like, oh, is this really gonna give me what I wanted? Or it was during COVID, but it was right after it started. So I was planning to go in person, and then they changed, and then I went for online anyways. And it was a very standard kind of, vinyasa, very kind of, I would say, mainstream kind of yoga. But at that time, I didn't know what it was. I wanted to know more about yoga. So that's why I took it. I wasn't planning to become a teacher. But I became really interested in it. But when it came to the teaching aspect, especially, and to just everything was just very much like being back in school, kind of like I had to print out this, like, I don't know how many pages kind of book, where I spent a lot of money in printing out
your manual, your teacher training manual.
Yeah, exactly. and then there was like this, there was some live sessions, we could ask questions, but it was all kind of like, okay, here's the information and ask questions if you need to know how to do things, kind of thing. So it was very kind of like, I mean, I learned a lot. Like, I cannot say that that's not the truth. Like, it's definitely, but it's definitely was very kind of standard. And especially when it came to the teaching part, if I ever thought of teaching, I was incredibly overwhelmed by the idea of having to do all these like different sequences and planning a sequence for every single class. And most of all, my personal practice, which I've had for many, many years, that I've kind of like developed on my own, sort of picking in from different kind of teachers that I've had over the years, was much slower, much more, like basically slower. And then I felt lazy when I was in this training. I was like, am I lazy? Like, because I like to go slow and I don't like to feel like I'm doing an exercise, when I'm doing my practice. And I also don't want to teach that because it just felt completely overwhelming and just not what it felt good to me and what felt like it helped me, having dealt with anxiety. I felt like these classes were just like, like super high paced and me unable to follow with my breath even. So that kind of triggered sometimes a little bit this anxiety at times. So when I found you, I was like, I'm not lazy. There's a,
you're advanced. You're not only not lazy, you're advanced. How about that?
Yeah. And of course I started to know about other modalities of like yin and so on, but yin was not what I was doing. I was still in, let's say, in a, if you call it like movement, flow, whatever you want to call it. So when I found first it was your podcast, and then I tried some of your classes and the on demand, and then eventually I went on to the training. So it was very much the approach that I felt like this is totally like, it totally syncs up with me, and also like all the conversations you were having in the podcast. And then in the teaching, the teacher training itself, I think that I feel like I've learned from, like, I don't know how many we are in the training, 15, 20 people. I have no idea, because it depends on the time that people, how many join in every time.
People come in and people come out. It's like you said, a year is a lot of life.
But I feel like I've learned basically not from just your experience, your knowledge, but I've learned from 15 other people, because it's so co-creative. that in a way, cool. and people that are there also, they've done their teaching, they've done their life experience, they, even if they haven't done maybe necessarily so much yoga, but they have other experience of life or of other kind of modalities of, whatever, kind of like healing or movement or whatever things. And also there are some of them are very experienced yoga teachers, actually.
There's a full range, fully experienced, and then people who haven't ever taught before. It's a pretty amazing range.
Yeah, and I've learned from each and one of them every time they said something or they shared something. So it has been, that's why it's been like I've had, as I said, 15 teachers almost, instead of just one. I mean, officially you're the teacher, obviously, but
no, I love that. I love that. Even on more like watching things on replay, it still felt co-creative, because that is the whole intent of why I do things the way I did things, so that we can have that kind of communal wisdom. So I'm glad that felt like that, dude. That's amazing. I'm so happy for it.
Yeah, and at the beginning, I was like, when you were kind of explaining how the structure would be, like you'll have a video and then, to watch on yourself, and then we'll have an hour and a half to talk. And I was like, what are we going to do for an hour and a half? Like, if we're just going to, you know what I mean? I was a little bit anxious at first.
Believe me, I know what you mean.
Yeah, because I'm a teacher as well. Like, I teach at university level, and I'm just like, if I just sat with my students for an hour and a half in Zoom, especially, I would be like super anxious about, not having a lecture, but somehow you always have had something to add or to bring us forward, or, you facilitated in a really like open way. And you always made also, I love that you always made room to talk about anything and everything, in the sense of like, you can talk about today's, like the video that was related to today's meeting, or we can talk about also what was discussed in the podcast, or about previous stuff, or, technically not like obviously anything and everything, but in a way, like there was this space of talking about a lot of things. And that really felt like can tap into many different things, and there was always space for people to share their experiences, their knowledge. So that has been a lot like great learning from others. I'm
so happy. I have to say, like you mentioned when you were talking about online trainings, I too have had hesitations about it, but my hope was that we could find a way that even folks who, like I said, are on the other side of the planet and can't come to everything live could still get something from it. And it seems like that was the case. Thank you so much, Zubia. I really, again, appreciate you sticking through all this whole year and making it work for you. And like I said, the times that you came, it was always lovely to have you there. And I don't think it has to be an end necessarily. I hope to someday see you in person and not necessarily have it be online also.
Yeah, that would be lovely. I can't believe that year is over already. I'm just like, what?
I know. Well, we have like a little bit of time left yet.
Yeah.
And so I'll be seeing you some probably before the official conclusion of this year, but just really lovely to have you around, and thanks for everything.
Thank you.
All right. I'll see you. Take care.
Bye.
Okay, here we are. Thanks to you and your decision to hit play. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown, and I am very grateful to you for doing that. Thanks for being here. Welcome if you're new, and all the rest of y'all, what's up? Maybe we could take a moment to see how we're doing. If it's possible, maybe just stop everything that you're doing for a moment right now and close your eyes and drop in. Just take a moment. All right. How you doing? Are you good? If not, that's okay. You don't have to be good. Maybe you dropped in just now and you didn't like what you saw. That's okay. At the very least, we're here, and maybe that's just enough for right now. I want to mention that I did come to a final verdict on how I plan to proceed as it regards my hip pain. I did meet with my doctor this week to discuss the results of my MRI, and I have decided what I'm going to do for now, and I'm going to give you the full report on the other side of today's talk. If you're interested, you can stick around to the other side for that. Sitting here right now, I'm reflecting on the malleability of time once again, because it's like almost the end of the year. How did that even happen? And longtime listeners know that it's become almost an annual tradition at this point for me to bring up my sugar and screen addictions. It's that baked in cultural thing about resolutions and wanting to improve yourself, which I don't think is necessarily bad, although this idea that we have to forever be improving ourselves, is problematic. I will say I always take the ritual of this end of year time into New Year's resolutions as just a way to do my own personal assessments. How did the year go for me? And are there places that I'd want to put my attention or some effort to? Are there places I want to take attention and effort away from? And when it comes to my screen and sugar addictions, I would give myself like a B, maybe a C, depending. It was different times of the year. I did better or worse as it pertained to my ability to make choices and clear perceptions around my screen time and intake of sugar. I also felt that, there were a lot of challenges this year, not just for me, but for everyone. And I think that it's important to be forgiving in these matters as well. I sometimes think of them as addictions because they are areas in my life where I don't feel like I have a good amount of control. But I'm hesitant sometimes because I know people who've had more serious addiction problems than me, And it just so happens that a few weeks ago, I got an email from friend of the show, Elisa Malinverni. She's in Switzerland, and she was on the show some years back when we were first coming to the pandemic. Well, she is my guest today, and we're going to discuss that and this new book that she wrote that's about addiction. And, I've certainly read about yoga for addiction just in the course of my study and wanting to be aware about evolutions in yoga practice, and certainly like trauma-informed yoga and yoga for addiction. These are certainly areas of yoga practice. There's a lot of interesting work and research that's been done. However, I would say that when I read about yoga for addiction, I haven't always thought of that as directly applying or being at least resonant with my addictions to screen and sugar, because I always feel like they're like not the same, like I'm not strung out on heroin or whatever. But I certainly have behavioral tendencies in me that are kind of the same. And that's very much the sort of angle that Elisa's book was coming from. So it really resonated with me. And I felt like there were some really valuable insights and helpful suggestions in the book as well. So I was very happy to reconnect with her and discuss it with her. Among a recap of where the yoga world's at, we do a little bit of a continuation from our conversation years ago. You'll hear it was wonderful to, again, reconnect with her. I'm very happy to be sharing it with you today. Real quick, before we get to that, I do want to send some love to our podcast premium subscribers. We simply couldn't be doing it the way that we're doing it without that. And honestly, it's really not just about like money, Yes, we need to make some money to cover the costs of doing the show, but really it's more just about the time and commitment. I've been doing the show now for more than 7 years. never missed a week. And really, it is a passion project for me, but that there are people out there who listen and care about it enough that they would go online and sign up for a podcast premium subscription for $5 a month. Maybe because they want to listen to all the old episodes, which there's all kinds of great stuff there. But I think also just to say, hey, I appreciate that you keep doing this the way that you are. It's a feedback loop. It's an energy field that helps keep the show going. And I really appreciate everybody who contributes to it. Today, I specifically want to say thank you to Catherine Murphy and Nomi Schmerling. Thanks, Catherine and Nomi, for being part of it, helping me do this. If you want to learn more about becoming a podcast premium subscriber, along with all of my other stuff, the teacher training and the live classes and the teacher's calls and all the stuff that I'm doing, everything can be found at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, y'all, I think that might be good for now. I will touch base with you on the other side. But for now, let's go ahead and get to it. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with Elisa Malinverni. Hello?
Hey.
Hello, Elisa. What's up?
Hi. What's up with you?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, really? Oh, God.
Here we
Wrong
are.
question.
Here we are
again, 2 years later. Amazing.
And we just started, right?
Yes, I know that, of course.
Okay, good. You listen to the show. You listen, the
faithful
deal.
Listener. Yeah. But I've just come back. I was just listening earlier to the episode you did with, I forget his name, the blue light colored lens sober guy.
The blue light blockers. Yeah.
Blue light blockers. That was it. Yeah. That's really interesting. It goes well with what I guess we're going to talk about today.
Maybe some. I hadn't really made the connection between that episode and our conversation. But yeah, I could totally see why you would think that.
Yeah, of course, it sparked my interest because he's kind of sober curious, I guess you would say.
Yes. Well, he's more than sober curious. I mean, if you listen to his podcast, he's very anti-alcohol in a sense.
Yeah, I haven't listened to the whole thing. I guess I'll get to that part.
Yes. Well, again, for me, what's interesting is I come to those idea of wearing blue light blockers from kind of a holistic perspective of wanting to try to be more in the rhythms of the natural phases of light.
Yeah.
And other people use them as like a kind of optimizing performance kind of thing.
Yeah. I heard that part where you said, to me, it's less about biohacking and more holistic. And I totally get that.
Well, I have to say, I read your book and I got a lot out of it. And I'm glad to have this chance to talk with you.
I'm so glad. I'm really nervous. We are about to publish. Yes. Yeah. And I have been terrified for the last couple of weeks, 3 weeks. I'm like, oh God.
What's the word?
What if it's horrible?
Oh, if it's horrible? Oh, it's definitely not horrible.
Many worries.
I mean, we'll get to it. I think that I'm happy to share with you what my big takeaways were from it. And I certainly appreciate it. So it's definitely not horrible. So whatever that's worth.
Thank you. Thank you.
But before we get to that, I did go back, as you say, and look to see that next month marks 2 years since we last spoke.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was December. It was December 2020 when we spoke. And it was, I'm putting myself back into that time, and it just seems like another lifetime almost already.
Another lifetime. So much happened since then.
And, the conversation that we had I started around, you had written that blog post about how everybody was, when everything went online, and then everybody was doing free classes on Facebook or whatever for a while.
Yeah.
And some of us were like, hey, wait a second, maybe we want to think about that for a moment before everybody just starts giving everything away now,
Yeah.
Not that that's not a good thing to do, but it presented issues, and I remember we had a conversation about that. And honestly, I've paid attention some to Switzerland and Denmark because to be frank, I kind of trust the public health officials a little bit more there than sometimes I do here at my own home. But I guess I am curious, just how are things? Are classes back online? I remember when we were talking back then, everything was still sort of locked down and stuff. So what's the update? What do things look like in Switzerland, or at least where you are in Switzerland nowadays?
Well, there have been, especially in terms of the yoga world, there have been interesting developments, which I think are more or less the same for the whole world. So as of last February 2022, the government, I think they, and quite surprisingly so, all the safety measures like wearing masks and what else? Yeah, for yoga classes, all the distance stuff was canceled from one day to the next. So we basically went back to normal life. And except for maybe health facilities, they had masks for a little bit longer, but it was even public transportation, everything like no masks anymore. And that went quite well. Like the statistics for infections didn't explode. Yeah. And so ever since then, life has been back to normal. But interestingly so, yoga studios and teachers, we're all struggling. Like regular students have not come back, and many yoga studios, even the larger ones, like the big corporate ones, are closing, or at least closing one location. And for me too, I just canceled one of my regular classes. And my observation is actually that I was doing even better during the pandemic, even though, there were times when I could only take 4 students per class, but I was doing it anyway, or I was teaching online, or I could only have 7 students in my studio. But people were suffering from all of the uncertainty, and people really needed that anchor that yoga could give them. And now that uncertainty is gone, and basically we've gone back to normal. I think I can say that people need yoga less, and it's actually. I feel a little bit embarrassed saying that, but it's hard not to take that personally, because they were so like, oh, thank you for offering us that safe harbor during the pandemic. And now, the pandemic is apparently over, and it feels like, I don't need my yoga teacher anymore. I'm good. Like I found other things. I'm traveling again. And, I want to be flexible with what I do on my Wednesday night, so I can't commit. So yeah, that's where we are.
Wow. That's so interesting to hear, because if everything went back to normal, like cafes and all the other kinds of activities that were suspended for a time went back to normal, but not yoga classes.
Yeah. From the outside circumstances, everything is back to normal, but just people. Yeah,
something shifted.
I guess that was bound to happen, that it was going to change us in general, and also the way people practice. Like I've had feedback from students saying like, oh, and that is actually lovely. They said,
I just do it on my own now. Whenever I do
it on my own. And one student said to me, I've come to you for years, and when I do my practice at home, like I hear your voice and I remember things that you pinpointed for me. And that is actually beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just not survival as a business model.
I would say it's not a good business model. That's definitely true. But I would say that it could come back around again. Who knows? It's interesting to me. I think those relationships, like I've certainly had people who practiced me for some time and then didn't really need to practice with me anymore. And you gotta accept that and embrace that and consider that like as a success, I think. Yeah. That they know their practice well enough, that they learned their yoga enough to not have to come to class anymore. In a way, it's a strange paradox, but yeah, that is a successful story.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do think that there's a place for connection and community and group practice and being around other like-minded people. And
absolutely.
So
I think we probably said that last time already, but yeah, nothing can replace the group magic. I feel like I believe in that even more so than before the pandemic. There's just something uplifting and yeah, we're social beings. We need to be in community, not all the time, but at least some of the time.
Well, it's been my observation that, yes, it seems like a lot of like the main street yoga centers, like the storefront yoga centers and like the drop-in, whatever, foot traffic based teacher training models, those are not the same. And because there's now all these online opportunities and people practicing by themselves at home, they don't necessarily see the need to drive 40 minutes for an hour-long yoga class when they can just do it at home by themselves or with a video or with a live Zoom class now, you know?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know for myself now, only now really, I'm feeling like this impulse of, okay, I need to be in the room with people and wanting to make an effort. But it seems like what I was going to say is that the circles are smaller, but more deep. Like I'm not trying to reach as many people as possible anymore. It's just like, can I reach a few people who are into it?
Yeah, and my observation is that that is actually still much appreciated. Just to create, like when that is the focus. I'm actually also a little tired of teaching weekly yoga classes. I prefer to offer something longer, once a month or every 3 months. But then you have more time to really build on the community feeling, and you just spend some time together, of course, doing, some kind of practice, but mostly appreciating being in the same energy field.
Yeah.
Just to say something woo-woo.
No, that's not woo-woo at all. Let's talk about that energy field, because I agree, because stretching it out over longer times, and like you said, recognizing the coming together for this exchange of energies, of attention, as opposed to just a bunch of like information dumping or something.
Right.
And it does mean a shifting of expectations and whatnot. But I certainly think that there's still a lot of good yoga happening, even online. But I guess it's just a matter of how much is coming back onto like the actual in-person scene. And that's been like a slower uptake. As you said, people aren't going back to yoga centers or in-person yoga classes like they did before the pandemic.
Yeah. And, and I think the similar things are true for you. I mean, for me, it's not a tragedy. I mean, a tragedy.
Well, that's a slip of the tongue. I didn't realize how much tragedy and strategy are so closely related.
Me neither. Not until this point. Because I have I'm lucky enough to have a yin yoga teacher training now that I get to offer in different studios. The book's coming out now. And in a way, I'm also grateful because it's forced me to pivot away from the regular weekly class, which I was doing also because I was thinking, I just need the steady income. And it's just kind of forced me to trust that the more occasional things that I do will also, I can focus on those more, and they will also yield a certain income, and they will very probably also be more satisfying because I get to spend a longer arc of time with people. I get to cultivate relationships. It's not like a quick in and out 75-minute thing. Yeah. So, I mean, in the end, it's all good. I mostly feel for all the people in my circle who who own yoga studios and have to shut them down. Just this morning, I heard of another one in Berne, in the city where I live, having to shut down. So yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, it's I totally get what you mean, that the kind of deeper learning programs, whether that's teacher training or longer form, if you will, programs, they do offer this opportunity to have a deeper study sometimes than just weekly yoga classes would. And depending on how you're working the business side or financials of these things, sometimes the way things are priced and stuff, you make more money off of those things because they're higher ticket items, you know? But then that also excludes people. And I still think that for myself, I maintain some kind of more like weekly practice component, but it's certainly not as extensive as it used to be, but I like that, but I don't do that necessarily because I have to make a lot of money off that, but I use that to support the other deeper learning programs that I do, you know?
Yes,
as part
absolutely.
of it. Yeah. Interesting. Well, gosh, I guess we just continue to adapt and do whatever we can. And it's interesting you said yin yoga. That does seem to be like the popular style. I'm scheduled to record with Berne Clark again, actually.
No way. Oh,
yeah. I just scheduled him the other day.
We have a conversation with Berne.
Let me know if you want me to ask anything. But I think that it seems like that's become very popular style. Is that true where you are?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I'd say so. Maybe there has been a bit of a shift, I guess, you know, we're all getting older. And I guess, maybe the heyday of the fast-paced fluid vinyasa is
because that's what I was kind of hinting at. Because I have suspicion. I don't always know how much is that just me projecting onto the situation, but
and I'm in the same boat with you. Maybe I'm just projecting. For me, like I started teaching yin yoga almost 10 years ago, and it's not, I'm pretty hyper flexible, so I don't practice it a lot myself. Like I need to balance with a lot of yang or like strength focused stuff. But what I love about yin yoga is the psychological component, because it has like these, well, first of all, it's, you know, you stay still, like it's completely static. And that in and of itself is just so restful to just, you know, set a timer and be like, okay, I'm just going to be here in this butterfly or Baddha Konasana for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And you set yourself that time frame, and you can, for me, it's really, it's the cousin of mindfulness meditation, because you just sit there and observe your thoughts, but you don't like, sometimes that's difficult, but you don't react. You try not to fidget. You try not to get up and go to the fridge and, you know, get a drink of something. And then also my experience is that because the poses, maybe the most important distinction to make is that yin yoga is not restorative yoga, although they can easily be combined, but yin yoga is not comfortable. It's, you look for that physical edge, like where is the sensation in that pose? Where does it become like a little intense, but not too much, like a dull, nice little dull, spread out pain. And then you try to sit with that. And I love that experience just outside the comfort zone, because to me, that really builds our mental, emotional resilience.
It's so interesting because sometimes people talk about being in stillness, or often like yoga nidra or whatever, it's not considered as an active going to that place of uncomfortability like you're describing. And I guess that is an interesting way to distinguish yin yoga from other types of more static practices. Yeah.
And I maybe that's my biggest, I mean, there are a lot of aspects that I love about yin yoga. I mean, maybe that's the biggest takeaway for me, because in everyday life, we constantly self-soothe. Like we're tired, we have a cup of coffee, we're in pain, we take an Advil. We're always like reacting. And in yin yoga, you consciously make a decision to sit with sensation. Like it shouldn't be sharp pain, but you kind of create an artificial situation that is not 100% comfortable, and you experience it. You can actually breeze through that without reacting. And I think that's very empowering to experience that as human beings. When there is difficulty, we will not break. Like we can sit there and get through it. And after, it's a nice feeling to be like, I did this, but it's actually, again, restful, not when you don't have to react all the time to optimize your situation.
I get that. I guess I'm curious, is there times in your yin practice where it does get easy, or is it always about riding that place of uncomfortability or edge?
For me, it's entirely dependent on the day, on how much I've slept, where I am in my menstrual cycle, how stressed I am, what time of day it is, what I've done the day before. So, I mean, there are obviously poses. I think for every individual, there are poses that are more challenging. Like for me, it's I guess I would say it's the hip openers. For other people, it might be more like the shoulder girdle opening poses. But no, like it doesn't, I mean, well, and Bernie Clark will probably be able to explain that.
We're a little bit off to the side, but I'm curious again, because that's like a interesting idea that if you go into something and for whatever reason on this day, it actually feels kind of easy to be there. Do you try to make it not easy anymore, or do you just let it be easy?
No, like one of my teachers, Josh Summers, he says, at the beginning, yin yoga can be, if you've lost flexibility due to aging or, postural habits, at the beginning, yin yoga can be a practice where you reclaim your natural range of motion. But once you've reclaimed that, it becomes a maintenance practice, like you maintain. And, no, it's not about, that's another thing I love about yin yoga. It's not about pushing or getting more flexible, obviously. It's a maintenance practice, because as we age, we're bound to lose mobility, or also bone density, or all those things. And yin yoga just helps because it's a static hold, and it triggers the recovery response in the body in all systems, skeletal, fascia, etc.
Well, I mean, I guess it's an interesting thing because I've been exploring these days, even like, I don't know if you heard that episode about hypermobility syndrome. So for some people, like going to sensation can be like too far.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I mean, I will repeat the caveat. I'm hypermobile. So I sprinkle the yin in, and the bulk of what I do is like you, I've started doing like pure, totally boring strengthening exercises, because
let's not think of them as boring, but yes, I know what you mean.
No, I find them really, really boring. Like repeating something for 40 seconds. I'm like, that's when I listen to podcasts.
Yes, that's funny. That's funny because a lot of people do listen to podcasts while they're working out, because the working out is just something they're doing. But I would say I've been trying to engage it more as like a different lens, and I'll be talking about it more on the show in terms of like this physical therapy I've been doing and stuff. So in any case, I didn't intend to talk to you about yin yoga so much today, but it is kind of take us, you said something earlier about the way that yin yoga and way that we do so much to self-soothe ourselves, and yin yoga making you have to sit with stuff that's there instead of that. And that is kind of a good transition to this book that you wrote, which
it is
right, isn't it?
It is. Perfect.
It's called Yoga for Recovering Adults and it's addicts.
Not adults.
Sorry, adults. Well, that was a good slip, though, I guess, right?
We all need to recover from adulthood and go back.
That's kind of what I
think so too, Jay. I agree.
It was a slip of the tongue, but it's an apropos slip of the tongue, given what you wrote, because that was the first thing I was going to say about it that struck me is, I have read other stuff or done some reading about yoga for recovery, and it is often kind of coming from someone who's been through, who was like on the streets or whatever.
Yes.
And then found their way out of it. But you seem to be coming at it from a very different angle, which I appreciate it, because I even, as you know, I say on the show all the time, I refer to my screen addiction and my sugar addiction. And I use the word addiction consciously because, and the definition I'm using, and I know that you consider different definitions of what addiction is in the book. The addiction definition that I'm using when I say that is, I recognize that these are things in my life that sometimes have more control over me than I have over them, that I'm not always choosing. And sometimes I feel like I'm doing it too much and I wish I wasn't doing it as much, but I still am. Like I don't have a control over it. And it seemed to me that's kind of an angle that you were coming from, because you sort of start out by saying, I don't know if you say I'm not an addict, but you're not coming from that place like other people from the streets, that you're looking at it from a different standpoint in terms of we all have kind of these addictive behaviors often, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we are on heroin on the street.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of like you say, I come from that place. Like, I start the book by saying I'm not an addict. But I guess what then I hope shines through is that, yeah, my personal belief is that we're all addicts in a way, because I really like the Buddhist definition that's in the chapter, in the interview the chapter based on the interview with Josh Korda from Dharma Punks, that in Buddhism, addiction is just one form, maybe one extreme form of grasping, of reaching for something to make the pain go away, whatever that pain is. And I think we all recognize ourselves in that, because we all have whether it's coffee or sugar or workaholism or porn or Netflix, we all have one.
Or yoga.
Or yoga. Right. Yeah. Or fitness. I know very few people that don't have this tendency. And I think it's a very human thing, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, otherwise, I guess we'd be depressed if, we just endured and didn't have the impulse to improve our situation. But as I think you said something like, there are those moments when we become unconscious and the behavior takes over control. And then we're no longer making the conscious decision, because I have moments when I'm like, I'm going to have a piece of chocolate and I'm going to enjoy it. And that's very different from being stressed and like, not being able to stop. And it's something that, is just a temporary relief, and it doesn't really fix the problem of the stress. It doesn't really, mitigate the situation. It's just one way to feel better temporarily.
Yeah, I think there's sort of layers of it. There's times where, like, I'm in a healthy way making a conscious choice. Like, I eat pretty healthy on a regular. So yeah, today I'm going to eat this chocolate cake or whatever it is, and in a way that's a healthy thing for me to do, because I've been too restrictive with myself at other times, so to have flexibility or whatever, to make a conscious choice to eat something that's maybe, if I ate that all the time every day, wouldn't be healthy for me, but every once in a while is fine. And then there's other times where I'm choosing to eat more sugar than I know is healthy for me, and I'm aware that I'm doing it. I'm saying to myself, I really shouldn't be eating this sugar, but I'm going to go ahead and do it, and I know it's not a good thing, And then there are other times when it's almost like unconscious, where I've just wolfed down a whole bunch of stuff before I even considered whether it was a good idea or not.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where yoga practice potentially comes in, to kind of have us have more awareness moment to moment, so that we're not unconsciously shoving things into our face or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it still happens.
It does. It does. And I guess you mentioned something interesting in the book that I thought I would ask you about, which is this open drug scene in Berne in the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. You mentioned a couple of times it had a big impact. Why? What was it about that time or that part from your childhood or whatever that plays into you writing this book?
Yeah, I guess. And I think I'm not the only one. I think a lot of us have that. It's sort of a fascination with the underworld. And for that time, I forget the exact dates, but I think it was started in 1986, 88 until 1992, 93. So for those that aren't aware, we had, there was just, I guess, in the aftermath of the 1986 68 cultural revolution, a lot of people started using heroin, and more so. And And these people used to congregate in public parks. So that's what the open drug scene means. And there was a lot of drug traffic, and the authorities just weren't able. It was so many people, so many addicts, that the authorities sort of weren't able to contain it. And there was also a big conflict between more conservative politicians and more progressive politicians that said, if the more we repress, the more because they were actually junkies were several times, they were chased from one park and they just moved on to the next. So repression and criminalization didn't seem like a good final solution. And during the time, I was a child, like I was 86, I was 40 years old, and 92, I was 10, and I was 12. So, and we lived like the tram that we rode from my parents' house to go into the city was right by one of those parks. And then at one time the park was near the main station. So and the junkies were everywhere. Like they were begging in the streets, they were asking for money, they were injecting in full view. And I just have a lot of memories. And as a kid, I guess it's doubly scary because all other adults, like they sort of seem like they have it together. And then there's these people in the middle of winter wearing socks because they don't have shoes, and wearing like a t-shirt because they don't have a coat. And yeah, just things that stick with you. And yeah, I guess it was just impactful that at an early age, I saw what low bottom addiction looks like. And yeah, I guess that's one, because I've been asking myself that question a lot, writing this book, like, why addiction? And because there's some addiction in my family. My father used to be a heavy smoker, but he stopped like 15 years ago. He never touched a cigarette again. Like there's no, like my parents weren't alcoholic. I don't have that kind of story, but I think it's this fascination with one type of craving or grasping, to use the yoga philosophy word, that represents human nature so perfectly, like so extreme that you can't overlook it, and that we are so.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.